brings us up to page Lamed Aleph. Okay, very good. So we started the second chapter on page Lamed Aleph. This chapter is dealing with the sphere of Keser and what we can learn about the deeper meaning of the sphere of Keser, and then how we can relate that to our own daily living and improving that. So in the last session, we went through the first aspect of Keser. This chapter 2, basically comprising of, I think it's 8 different aspects of Keser. This is the first one. Last time we did the first paragraph. Let's just do it again quickly, and then focus on the section which we hadn't completed last time. So Harishona. The first aspect of Keser is a kol el sakol. Remember, we discussed how the sphere of Keser includes within it everything. He midas hanava, and that's connected to the midah of hanava. And this attribute of humility is associated with the sphere of Keser. Why? Al kol midos ve'enim alvim is goyim lamala, because the sphere of Keser is the sphere above all other spheros, yet it is not arrogant, as it were, and separates itself from the other spheros, but on the contrary, it actually, with humility, makes itself as if it is nothing, negates itself, so that all of the influence from God can come through Keser and benefit the spheros below it. Umnam yoredes umistakeles lamata tadir. The spheres are described here in a way which is kind of personified, but that's not the point. It's just a metaphor. V'zeh mishnei ta'amim. And this is for 2 reasons. Ha'echad, shehu bosh lihistakel b'sibaso. The midah of Keser is embarrassed, as it were, to gaze up towards its founder, its creator, that's God. Elamatzil mabid bo tomid lahativoi. But rather that which created it, God, is constantly looking on Keser and influencing it. V'u mabit b'tachtonim, and then Keser directs that flow from God on high down below. Therefore, a person also has to be very careful not to look upward, because a person is also like Keser. A person has included within himself many different strengths and many different attributes. And in this respect, man has the similitude of Keser. He's being very all-inclusive. Yet a person should not be arrogant about having all of that. Rather, a person should be humble, realizing that all of our talents, all of our strengths, all of our creativities, and all of our attributes come from God. And rather than being arrogant about what's not ours, but was rather given to us, we should humbly direct our energies towards benefiting others. And this would be like the midah of Keser. A person should constantly be looking below, to negate himself as much as possible, to empty himself of self. Remember, we discussed this in great detail in the previous session. We're just reviewing quickly now, just to get back in the loop. This attribute of Keser and humility is manifested in one's head. A person is not arrogant without his elevating his head. So a person who's holding his head up high is a sign that he is full of himself. But a humble person, generally speaking, is going to have a body language, a physiology where his head is kind of directed downwards. And that would be an aspect or a manifestation of humility. And remember, we spoke also about how Keser is elevated above all other spheros because of its humility. And we compared that, for example, to Moshe Rabbeinu, who of course was the greatest of all rabbis, the man who knew the most Torah than anybody else did, closest to God more than any other person. Yet the Torah says about him that Moshe was onav me'od. He was more humble than anybody else. And we also compared, if you remember, this idea with the sneh, the burning bush, how it was specifically in the burning bush that God's presence was revealed, and it wasn't consumed because of its nothingness. And so this was a message, we said, that was being conveyed to Moshe as well, that Moshe would be elevated to the extent to which he would negate himself of his sense of self, so that there would be nothing of self that would be consumed after his being infused with the glory of God. Said to Moshe, "Shal na'al kol ma'al reglecha, take your shoe off your foot," meaning, right, divest yourself of your body, divest yourself of your sense of self, and then come close and learn the lesson of the sneh, that you should also be elevated because of humility and not be consumed by the presence of God that's there. And that's really the meat of Keser. Keser is that burning bush. It's that that very humble sphera, which on account of its being nothing, meaning there's nothing of itself, it's able to have, therefore, within it everything, and therefore be a proper conduit for the presence of God without being consumed, rather, right, sharing and pouring out that divine influence into the rest of creation, into the rest of the spheres. Hold on 1 second. He was going to say something.
Keser and Chesed are two different things.
Yeah, two different things.
And
although
Chesed is also a sphera?
Yes, Chesed is a sphera.
But different than Keser.
Yes.
Okay.
Keser includes within it Chesed.
Yeah.
One of the things we learned about Keser, insofar as being all-inclusive, is that it has within it all of the other spheros, which are refracted like light through a prism into the component parts. So Keser has within it the different spheros, which are refracted through it when the divine light passes through it.
And you said like each sphero kind of relates to one of our forefathers.
Mm-hmm.
Is Keser specific to Moses?
The relationship to let's say between the spheros and these personas are usually in the midos, not in the faculties. So they're not in Chochmah Bina V'das, but rather from Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. And Moshe is Netzach.
Okay.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to ask, why does the highest sphere, the most humble one, meaning why is that the one that holds, so to speak, all of the attributes? The one that, I mean, if it's the one that, is it because the one that's empty of everything, and then that's the one that can hold everything? Is that
Exactly.
Is that the concept?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And the negation of self makes room for everything. The negation of self allows or on the human plane one to become that much more aligned with God. So of course, the more that one is aligned with God, the more elevated the person will be. But that's going to be a function of how humble the person is. So you have this dichotomy where really the more humble something is, or the more hollow something is, the more it can be filled with godliness, and therefore, by definition, the more it becomes affixed, attached, and elevated, by and then to God. So that's the dichotomy. You'd think it would be the opposite. A person who's negating himself would be downtrodden, but that's not true. In a spiritual sense, the person who's negating his sense of self can become that more aligned with and full of God, and thereby become elevated accordingly. That's Keser.
I just think on a personal sense, I never understood what it means to just be humble. Meaning, I mean, there's different things like egos and things, and we're not talking about that. I mean, on a personal level, what is an example of an individual? What are character traits that one has to be on to reach Keser in order to be the most humble individual? What was it that Moshe Rabbeinu had that made him the most humble? I hear the word thrown around, but I don't understand what it meant. Like
in this sense, what it means is what we call bitul hayesh, which is the nullification of one's sense of being. How did you translate the other day, Yesh?
I don't remember.
And making oneself ayin. ein, which means nothingness, but it's referring to the nothingness other than God, which means that a person is really making himself godly. By making himself nothing, he's actually making himself everything. But I think that's it. We're talking about a humility where the person is not aware or conscious of oneself, and therefore one is not demanding of others. One is not makpid. How shall we say this? You're turning from it to term not makpid. Yeah.
Particular demand.
Yes, he's not. He's not particular about the way other people treat him and demanding or expecting respect or recognition. And the truth is that generally speaking, if a person has truly good qualities and he's not just a pushover, right? But he, despite having those good qualities, really does view them as being nothing that he's deserving of credit or honor for them, and that they actually are gifts that were given to him by God, and so forth and so on. That the person really does have good qualities, but he doesn't make a big fuss of it, and he's not fastidious about all of that. So then people generally recognize that and actually like that person or attracted to that person, even would humble themselves before such a person, despite the fact that that person himself is very humble. Whereas a person who either does and certainly if he doesn't have qualities, but he's all arrogant about it, it usually raises up opposition to that person. Yeah, so that you see it by and large that's the case, right? Right. Even if a person does have good qualities, and all the more so if he doesn't, but if he's arrogant and full of himself, and he's constantly inserting himself everywhere and trying to gain superiority over others and so forth and so on, he's constantly going to be really meeting with friction and opposition to other people. Whereas the other person, like I said, is exactly the opposite. People are kind of almost like more than happy and bend over backwards to try and facilitate him and help him and work with him and so forth and so on. He's non-threatening. He's sincerely humble, non-threatening type of a person. So you see people attached, and that's the quality of godliness. Yeah? That if a person asserts himself, then he's causing others to, then he's repelling others, and he's also repugnant in God's eyes as well. But a person who's humble and emptying himself of his sense of self, he doesn't stand on these formalities, he's not full of himself, he's not fastidious about his demands regarding other people's treatment and so forth and so on. So that actually attracts and draws other people towards him, and that's being godly. That's being godlike. So this person attaches through this way. Right, the person attaches to God, and other people attach to him. Right, so he's really kind of bringing the world into the influence of God, whereas the other person is he's pushed away from God, and he's pushing other people away from himself as well. It's like the pasuk says, "Da ma'lamala mimach." You should know what is above you. The pshat of the pasuk is you should know about God, who's above you. Da milamalimach. Know what's above you, God. But the Hasidim explain it slightly differently, which is da, no, milamala, that which above, mimcha. Right, that which is above is from you, mimcha. If you act in a way of humility and goodness and benevolence, so you should know that the result of that is that what's going to be above you is going to be expressed in the same way. Da, milamala, no, whatever anhaga you see, whatever kind of attribute of godliness you see being expressed in the world, yes, mimcha, it comes from you. It's dependent on you. If you act with humility, you're going to draw down divine benevolence. If you act with arrogance, then you're going to cause God to be repelled. So I think this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about somebody who's depriving himself or deriding himself or making, despising himself, depression and things like that. And that's what we're not talking about. We're talking about a negation of a sense of self, yeah, which is different, right? It's different. The person's not deriding himself.
Theoretically, probably the best way to achieve it would be to go off on a mountain somewhere by yourself and meditate. That's like what other religions kind of do to achieve the same.
Yeah, one could do that, but one could do the same thing by staying where he is. Yeah, one could do the same thing by staying where he is, and that's even more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, there's obviously a benefit to the person himself for attaining humility. But as we're seeing here, right, the whole purpose is not just what he gets out of humility, but what the world gets out of humility. And that's the whole point of Keser. Keser is not, right, isolating itself within the presence of God, nullifying and negating itself within the presence of God. Keser was about, right, positioning itself or being positioned, using its position underneath God in order to share that divine influence humbly with others. So that would be an argument against asceticism. On the contrary, the humility according to the Torah's teaching would be best expressed when that level is attained for the purpose of sharing it with others.
Does that nothingness leave room for like happiness, or is that completely?
Certainly, but the question is, how would we define that happiness? If it's a self-centered, egocentrical type of pleasure that we mean by happiness, then no, that's probably not that would not result from Keser. But a serene sense of joy through fulfillment would be attained.
This is like a theoretical level that no one could actually get to, right?
No. Maybe nobody could actually get to it entirely.
By following the rules of mitzvahs and stuff, it feels like that's such a personal, like you're imposing yourself so much by doing things, like certain customs and whatnot. So by doing the mitzvahs, you're almost inherently like...
But a person can still... I think that's really the point here. That living one's life and having an outlook on life, which is connected to the notion of Keser, would be to literally on the one hand have all of the mundane things in life included within our daily experiences, and also the spiritual things that we do, the mitzvahs and the Torah and everything else, all be included in Keser, but not feeling a sense, but as much as possible, avoiding feeling a sense of self about it and self-interest about it, but doing it for God or doing it to benefit others and for the world. And when a person is serving Hashem with those ideas in mind, so he actually is liberated from a lot of the tensions, a lot of the worries, a lot of concerns, a lot of frustrations that people who are living more egocentrical, aggressive, assertive types of lifestyles feel. So I don't quite see what you mean about that. I'm a person who's doing mitzvahs, he's keeping Shabbos, he's putting on tefillin, so forth and so on. In my mind, can totally try at least to view himself and what he's doing as being like negated, not like important from a personal point of view, but important in far as he's doing it for Hashem, or he's doing it as a way of serving Hashem, or he's benefiting other people in the world in general through his doing it, because he's becoming like this conduit through which his performance of mitzvahs and Torah learning is actually bringing down positive divine influence into the world. So he's like this Keser. Maybe that's the point here. We have to kind of think about kind of like mind shift. Yeah, I'm not doing the mitzvahs to get the reward. Yeah, there is a reward to be achieved through doing the mitzvahs, but I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing the mitzvahs to connect to God. I'm doing the mitzvahs in order to connect the world to God. Right? And in this way, I'm just a link. I'm just this conduit, this channel through which the divine energy flows. The result will be reward. Just like the result for humility will be elevation. But if you're doing it for the elevation, that's already arrogance and haughtiness, and you'll never get there. You can only get there if you're truly, if a person, to the extent to which a person is truly humble about it. And if he would ever become humble about the level that he achieves through his humility, so he would fall immediately. Because right now his sense of self would cause him to fall. It's kind of like, I can't quite think of a right analogy, but like if a person were walking on a straight line, and then it happened to occur to him that this was really a tightrope, he would probably fall. Mm. Before that, he was just walking in a straight line very naturally without thinking about it. But once he was thinking about what he was doing, right, so he becomes distracted by his thoughts, and those very same thoughts cause him to fall. Mm. I think there's a story about a particular Rabbi. I don't remember. I might have told you in the past. I don't remember the name, but there was a certain person who came to town, and he was a tightrope walker, and he advertised in town that he was going to do the tremendous feat of stringing a tightrope across a very turbulent river that ran outside of town, and everybody was invited to come and pay a certain amount in order to view this the spectacle. So people came and everybody paid, and he got up on this rope and he walked across this very thin rope across the very turbulent waters, and everybody was amazed. And afterwards, the people asked the rabbi who was there. They asked the rabbi, what does the rabbi think about this tremendous feat? He said, I don't know much about tightrope walking, and I'm not particularly impressed with the feat itself. But what it means to me, is that life itself is like traversing these very turbulent waters, and we do so on something as thin as this tightrope. And I can guarantee you that when that tightrope walker was walking across, he wasn't thinking about the money that everybody had paid into the coffers. He was thinking on absolutely only one thing, making sure he puts his foot exactly in the right place in order to get across to the other side alive. He's not thinking about the one. So he said, this is what I learned from the lesson. That we live through life, and it's a turbulent, and there are turbulent times. If a person's thinking about the reward, he's going to fall. He's going to slip, and he's going to prey to the turbulent waters of the Yetzer Hara. The reward is there. But believe me, when a person's crossing, if he thinks about it, he's going to fall. What a person really should be thinking about is just making sure that everything he does is exactly the right step that he has to make. Exactly the right step that he has to make. And when he has his mind singularly focused on making sure he makes exactly the precise and correct step every step of the way, he'll get to the other side safely, and then he'll get the reward. But the time to think about the reward is not on the way across. Start thinking about the reward, your attention will be deflected, right? And then you're sure to fall. So the same thing here. When an onav starts becoming aware of just how humble he is, right, he's certain to fall. Okay, that was kind of more an extended review of the first paragraph of this first aspect of Keser. Let's go ahead and do the second. So this is a new paragraph. V'harei en savlon v'onav ke'elokenu b'midas keser. There is no greater humble person or one who is long-suffering like our God regarding the midah of Keser. Meaning everything that we've described about Keser, there's no greater example of this than God himself. Shehi tachlis harachamim. The Keser itself and God is the quintessential expression of mercy. V'lo yikones lefonov shum pagam. There will not be brought before God any harm, any transgression, any impurity. V'lo avon, no transgression, v'lo din, nor judgment, v'lo shum midah, or any other attribute, monas milahashgiach ulahashpia tadir, that would prevent or limit God from giving his good influence over continually. Right? And that's out of God's humility. Because like we said, if God was fastidious, if God was makpid, if God, right, stood on the honor that he's really deserving of, then nobody would get anything. The world would cease to exist because creation simply would fall short of the mark. Yet God, out of his great humility, is long-suffering, overlooks indignity, all because of his humility, and therefore shares with, like Keser, shares with the world. So, since this is God's attribute, and we do find, right, our sources say time and time again, that God is an anvatan, right? God is extremely humble. And that's why Keser, which comes from Hashem, is the tool that's used to spread and disseminate godliness into the world. And that's why the tzaddikim who are humble connect to Keser as well and connect to God, because they are likes. But somebody who's arrogant separates himself from Keser, and he separates himself from Hashem because he's acting in a way which is not godlike. And that's why things which are, and people who are godly-like, will naturally draw other things towards them. Whereas people who are not, they're arrogant, they will repel. That's what we've done before. They'll repel people away from them. And they'll repel people away from God as well. So we, who have to emulate God in this midah of Keser, and the first aspect of this is the humility of Keser. So kach tzarich adam sheshum siba sheba'olam lo timnehu melativ. So too a person has to be sure that there's nothing that would prevent him from benefiting other people. V'shum avon lo maase v'shum avon o maase b'nei adam bilti hagun lo yikanes lefonav kedei sheyachvehu milhativ v'lo yisam hetzuchim tavasoi b'chol es b'chol rega. And just like God, a person should not allow any transgression or any misdeed that anybody who's done, which is improper, he should not allow any of these things to come within him and prevent him from benefiting this person, if this person needs some goodness for him. This is very interesting. So if somebody who, let's say, harms you, embarrasses you, takes advantage of you, whatever the case may be, according to this, a person who is acting in the midah of Keser, which is a reflection of the humility of God, would, like God, overlook all of these transgressions and all of these slights to our honor in order to give and benefit this person if we're able to. He shouldn't say, after embarrassing like that, I should do something for him. After harming me like that, I should do something beneficial for him. No, a person shouldn't say that. Despite the fact that he harmed me, or that so forth and so on, that's not going to be a reason why I shouldn't help him. If he needs help, I'll help. Mm-hmm. That's not an easy task at all. It's not an easy task at all to do.
I don't see how that's related to Keser for some reason.
Because Keser is selfless.
Oh.
And Keser's selflessness comes from being like God, who is selfless. Uh-huh. In what respect? Despite all of the ways in which the world falls short of the mark of serving God, and on the contrary, goes beyond that and actually transgresses against God, God still continues to sustain the world and do good for the world. So we want to emulate Keser, and God will do the same thing. Uh-huh. We will not stand on our honors, will not be, again, particular about what we think we're deserving of, but even if we've been harmed or mistreated or embarrassed, we'll still, we won't withhold the good that we can give to others. We'll still give that to the people, to the very same people who harmed us. Mm-hmm. It's a very difficult concept. I mean, certainly if a person is a Russia, we're supposed to reprimand that person. And even if it means embarrassing that person, and even if it means neutralizing that person's powers to prevent them from harming other people. But still, a person has to try and find some balance where I might hate this person's wicked deeds and evil deeds, but as a person, if he needs help, I'll be willing to help him. As long as that help wouldn't be empowering the person to do more harm. You have to say that. Yeah. But the point is, if this person generally needs help, so help the person and not hold the grudge, even though he's offended me. I was in that situation. Somebody offended me greatly. And I refused, and then the person asked me for help, and I refused to help the person. I was indignant. And I said, if you want to apologize, then I'll be more than happy to help. But you can't treat me on the one hand like that, without apologizing, recognizing you did anything wrong, and then expect me to help. The person wouldn't apologize.
Seems reasonable.
So I wouldn't help.
In a way, God does that, because if you transgress, then you still suffer in Gehenna or whatever. You have to pay back for that transgression.
There might be suffering here in this world too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you still do tshuva and apologize to God in
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah. But
in order to pay back.
But I guess the point here is that until that until that retribution is brought, God still continues to sustain the person. And he doesn't.
Yeah. He doesn't immediately.
Yeah, even though we haven't said I'm sorry, even though we haven't apologized.
In some cases, you might kill someone instantly, right? So.
Theoretically, yeah, but you see, that's generally not the way. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
God is long suffering and suffers the indignity of continuing to do all these goodness and kindnesses for us, despite the fact that we rebel against Him and don't even we don't even apologize. So I mean, I learned from this that in this scenario, I should have said something like, what you said offended me very much. I would hope that you would apologize. But even if you don't, if you need something, I'm still willing to help you.
Or even saying you offended me is putting yourself into the equation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. Well, after learning this, I've gotten one level higher.
Yeah.
You're right. The next level higher, the next level higher is, sure.
I don't exist. Here you are.
Yeah.
Seems a little.
It's very extreme. I personally don't feel like I'm on that level, to do that. But maybe I would say to the person, for you harm me, and you should want to apologize. But I'm not gonna be a stickler on that. I'm willing to help you out in our lives, but you should apologize.
So in a sense, it's like giving the ultimate free ride for people to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, we're taking advantage of God, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we should all be taken advantage of.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Theoretically, that's a situation that could arise that we are allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of, as it were, insofar as we're emulating God, who is in that situation, and He's not indignant about it. It's not particular about it. I mean, ultimately, He will be. And that's why I say, I tried to qualify and say, if this would empower a wicked person to perpetrate more wickedness and evil in the world, then I don't think this would apply. Mm-hmm. But just because He's harmed me shouldn't be a reason why I shouldn't do Him a favor when He needs it. That's what He seems to be saying. And just as God sits on high and He sustains Mikarne re'emim, the horns of the greatest of animals, vad beitzekinim, to the eggs of lice, meaning not only the lice themselves, but the unborn eggs of the lice. God sustains them from the greatest to the smallest. Shum birya, shilu yavaze habruyim mipnei pechisusam, because if God were to despise creation or the creations, because of their lowliness, lo yiskaimu filo rega, they would not be able to exist even one moment. Ela mashgiach v'noisen rachamim al kulam, but rather God oversees and has mercy over all of them, all of creation. Kach tzarich she'yeh adam meitiv l'kol. So a person who is acting in the attribute of keser, which is humility, sharing what it receives with others, without making distinctions. V'lo yisbaze shum nivra lefonav, he should give to others and not cause embarrassment and shame to them. Afilu bria kala shebekalos tihiyeh me'od chashuva be'enov, and even what seems to be the most insignificant of creatures, it should be important in his eyes. V'iten da'ato aleha, and he should pay attention to it and to its needs. V'yetiv l'chol hamitztarech el tavasar, and he should be willing to help all those who need his help. Like on Friday, it was Erev Shabbos. One of my neighbors called to my attention that there was a pigeon whose leg became ensnarled with some rope, and it was hanging from a pipe outside my window. And it was helplessly just hanging there with its leg flapping like this, and it was very cold, and it was snowy, and the thing was tied up there, who knows for how long. You know, if it was left there, you know, it would certainly die. It couldn't get itself free at all, that was for sure. But it was Friday, it was Erev Shabbos, there was so much to do. We're going to take a half an hour away from Shabbos preparations and take care of this pigeon. So one less pigeon in the world. What's the worst thing that happened? It's a pigeon, yeah? But my Rahmanis wouldn't let me let it go. And my children said, Daddy, try and do something to help save it. So I hang myself out of the window with a pole, and I try and shake it loose, you know, and it won't get loose. And this is absolutely ridiculous. It's freezing outside. It's Erev Shabbos, right? I'm a 50-year-old man with 12 kids, yeah, and I'm hanging out of hanging halfway off the window to save a pigeon. What if I fall out of the window? This is ridiculous.
We'll catch you.
What?
We'll catch you.
Yeah.
Hashem will catch you.
So I said to my son, this is absolutely ridiculous. I can't justify this. Shabbos, it's cold. I'm hanging out the window. This is dangerous. No, I can't save it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get the thing loose. I said, this is it. I tried. So I could, you know, forcibly try and disentangle it, and its leg would become, you know, probably break his leg off. So it would fly. It'll live. It doesn't live. It won't live. It's better. So that's what I'll do. I said, no, you can't do that. You're going to break the thing's leg. So what am I going to do? It's hanging there, dangling it. So it occurred to me, I remember once, I have a neighbor down the street who's a gardener, and he's got this pair of scissors on a long telescope pole. So you do the pole like this, it's like a pruning thing, and you pull a rope, and the scissors go bing, and you cut the... So I said, wow, remember, I said to my kid, I said, you wanted to save the bird, so go get the thing from the neighbor, and we'll see. But it was very difficult, again, because I'm hanging out the window, and this telescope thing is quite heavy, and I can't see properly. I'm saying, you know what, I'm going to end up snipping the thing's leg off anyway. How am I going to know that I get the rope and not the leg? You know? So I'm hanging out there, and I got the pole, and my son's hanging the thing, and I'm trying to look, I'm trying to see if I can get the rope or the leg, or the rope or the leg, and I pull it, you know, and say, you know what, I'll pull it, and if I hear the thing, like, it's a sign I got the leg. So don't snap. So I pull it, and sure enough, I hear, so I let go. I try to maneuver a little bit. I take it, I see it's got hold of something about the size of, you know, either the rope or the leg, and I pull it, and there's no And I said, look, I've been working on this for an hour and a half. Shabbos, I'm freezing, I'm hanging out the window. Look, this is the last chance. Either it's the rope or the leg, but I gotta go. Boom. I pull the rope, all of a sudden the thing goes flying. Flying, it's free. And everybody's
Clapping.
Yeah, clapping and happy. The thing is finally free. So it flies, and then it crosses the street and lands on a fence and falls. I'm like, oh my God, I snapped the thing's leg. It couldn't stand on the fence. I must have snapped the leg, but I didn't see any leg dangling there with the remaining piece of rope.
Maybe his leg was damaged from the beforehand.
So my son ran down there. In the snow, the thing was flapping around. He couldn't get up. My son picked up the pigeon. He brought it home, and everything was perfectly intact. The rope was cut, but a whole part of it was like ensnared around its claws and everything. So we surgically removed for another half an hour all the rope from the thing, and we actually kept it home. I wanted to let it go. My son said, "No, keep it. It's cold outside. Who knows? It must be exhausted and hungry. We'll nurture it through Shabbos and let it go after Shabbos." My son. The bird lover. He has a Rahmanis. Anyway, that's what we did. And yesterday, it was Sunday. Yesterday afternoon, it was already much warmer, and there was sun out, and it had rested and fed when over Shabbos, and we opened up the window, and it didn't want to go away. It didn't want to fly. So I said to my son, "You got to shoo it away." He said, "No, I don't want to shoo it away." Anyway, so he shooed it away, and he flew to the next roof over, and it just started walking right up the roof. Seemed to be quite fine, and all of a sudden a whole herd, like a whole bunch of other birds came over the other side of the roof, and they started pecking at each other. It was adorable. They must have been waiting for their friend to come home, which they did. Yeah. Anyway, Rahmanis, yeah? Even on something as you could argue, right? So another pigeon, right? So another pigeon. I got Shabbos, I got my life, yeah? It's cold out, I'm hanging out the window and everything. But we have to try to the best of our abilities to show Rahmanis on all of creation, no matter how insignificant. And this will conclude. V'zo mida teluya bekeser, basod harosh derech klal. And this is the mystery of keser, which is dependent on the rosh. Yes, the way of thinking, the head, which he spoke about physiologically being down, looking down, thinking about others, and also it's about a mental space, a mental place as well. What's a person's perspective? Is he negating himself? Is he full himself, or is he negating himself? Kesser would say, negate yourself in order to be truly fulfilled, to be filled with Hashem, and that would lead to complete and true fulfillment. And that would be true joy and happiness. Okay, let's end here.